Good morning. Hope you can hear me. Halima Abdirahman, can you hear me? Halima,
Yes.
thank you. Como, can you hear me? Wanjiko Mwangi, you in a position to hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Dr. Com.
Joyce? Joyce, or who is that? Anyway, we can start our class. I think we've waited long for people to join. If you are DHM student, inform your friends that class has already started. And also, if you are a DCMS student, if you are DTM student or the other one is a BMS student, inform your students, HRM, that the class has already started, and that one will be okay. Now, last week we covered a topic. Someone remind us topic that we covered. Those who are here. It was topic 6. Can someone remember what we covered last week?
Financial relations.
Thank you so much. Thank you for remembering on behalf of so many others. Who was that?
Judith.
Thank you so much for that. Yes, last week we covered financial relations, and I'm just going to go to do a recap, a very fast recap. And mark you, I'm not reading from anywhere. I'm just remembering what we learned. So then we did what we call financial relations, which was our topic 6. And we said financial relations is also known as financial communication. And we also said that financial relations is the relationship between financial institutions like microfinances, like banks and cooperatives, insurance, with what we call an organization. That an organization needs to have what we call a good relationship with the financial institutions. Because once it has good relationship with these financial institutions, when these organizations want to diversify, when these organizations want to do what? To develop themselves, when they want to engage in an activity that requires a lot of money and they don't have, then with the good relationship that they have with this financial institution, then it will be funded. Then they can get a loan from these people. Same case with insurance and so on and so forth. Then from there, we also looked at before we go to investor relations, we also looked at the way financial institutions attract investors in their organizations. And we said that it's a requirement by the law that organizations must do what? They must publish, or they must print their financial statements on what we call newspapers, for people to know the assets that you have, how much they are worth, and the liabilities that you have, and how much are your liabilities, and also the profit that you have made in that current financial year. It's a requirement by the law for organizations to do that, more specifically financial organizations. And as you do that, you attract investors, you attract customers, You also attract potential employees, because right now, if I ask some of you the organization that you'd want to work with, you will tell me the best performing organization in Kenya. You will tell me this is the organization I would want to work with. And then when we ask you why, you will tell us they pay very well. Why do they pay very well? Because also they have a very large large chain of clientele. And again, apart from that, they are making a lot of profit. They have never said that we have made these losses. They always report profits every financial year. So we said that financial communication is when organization, financial institutions specifically, advertises themselves on the newspaper and they tell us their account, their statement, their financial statement, how they are faring or how they have fared for that particular current year or that particular year. Now, apart from that, we also looked at what we call investor relations. And we said that investor relations is relationship between investors and the organization. Remember, as an organization, you have investors. Investors are people that come to you and they invest with you. For example, an investor may come and tell you, for example, you are organization ABC. They tell you that we are going to invest 100 million in this organization. So actually an investor puts money in the organization. And once he put money in the organization, he wants to see you expanding. And in the process of expanding and making profit, there is also the benefit that they get. So an investor can be an investor of so many. He has invested with so many organizations. We also gave an example of this guy. His name was Titus Naikuni. He had invested with Uchumi Supermarket severally. And this time it collapsed. And he was given a check of 500 million. And from his remarks, he said that they gave me, when Uchumi collapsed, they gave me a small check of 500 million, meaning that he had invested more than 500 million. So when you invest, you also wait for what we call returns. You don't just invest. It's like planting. When you plant, you wait for the plant to grow and give you the harvest. The same case with investors. And I think we said that investor relations and what we call financial relations, these are totally different things. So don't put them together, but usually they are put together. Financial relations and investor relations, they are usually put together. But an investor is someone totally different, and financial relations is totally different. So having said that, I think we can start our topic today, which is government and lobbying activities. Government and lobbying activities. I hope you can see my screen. This is chapter 7 or topic 7. It's government and lobbying activities. And we are saying government and lobbying are two terms. These are two terms again, just like when we covered last week, financial and investor relations. Now, these are two terms, government and lobbying. They are two terms that are used what we call interchangeably, but or they are used together when we talk about current affairs. Current affairs are things that are happening in our country, around us, every now and then. Now, this particular topic aims to describe and analyzes the relationship between these terms in such a way that they can be understood from the twin perspective of politics and public relations. And this analysis should provide an insight into significant segment of PR practice, that part which does not deal directly with market, which usually is called by one of the titles and which has lobbying inside it as what we call a component. So therefore, we are going to look at the perspective underpinning lobbying practices. We're going to look at government activities and lobbying from PR perspectives. We're also going to look at the elements of lobbying and the measurements of effectiveness. So then, before we go to lobbying, I would want to say this, that lobbying is a strategic PR activity. It's a strategic PR activity. It is one of the activities of PR. It's a PR what? It's a PR thing. Lobbying is a PR thing. It's a subset of public relations, just like financial and investor relations, which are a subset of public relations. The same case with lobbying. Lobbying is a subset of what we call public relations. So then we can look at lobbying and look at how it has been defined. Lobbying can be defined as a persuasive activity. It can be defined as a persuasive activity to change a public policy in favor of an organization. So the keyword is persuasive policy, and also to change public policy in favor of an organization. A group of people who are not directly involved in political processes. Now, the group of people who are, there is what we call the group of people who are not involved in political processes. Now, what do we mean? What we mean is this: public relations practitioner sometimes can be a lobbyist. Sometimes, not all public relations practitioners are lobbyists. But sometimes we can have PR practitioner who is a lobbyist. Now, who is a lobbyist? Lobbyist is a person who ensures that at least there is a government policy that has been made that is against his organization. That person will go and influence the decision of policymakers, change that particular decision. Now, that person is a lobbyist. For example, in Kenya, we had what we call the Social Hospital Insurance Fund, CHIF. Now, there are people who are against it, and there are people who are supporting it. Now, the people who are against it may go to the government and tell the government to do what? To change that policy. For example, yesterday I was watching the news, and I think they were the MPs, and they were saying that that particular social hospital insurance fund, it does not cater a lot with, it does not benefit a person who has got more than two wives, more than one wife. It only caters for only if you have only one wife. So they were against it, and they were saying that that clause needs to be relooked at to accommodate a second, a third, and even a fourth wife. So in other words, these are lobbyists. Sometimes you'll find that these are people, in the midst of them, they are lobbyists. But this one, they were MPs. Now, lobbyists, they try as much as possible to change the decision that has been made. And mostly you'll find that lobbyists are people like activists, Lobbyists are people who have been in government before. Lobbyists are people like ex-soldiers, ex-chiefs, ex-DOs, ex-MPs. They were MPs before, they were governors before, and they understand how the government works. So then when you give them a task to go and accomplish, they know where to and which office to visit and actually deal with the tax or work with the tax, or as much as possible to come up with a solution as at hand, with the problem at hand, or the problem that you have at hand. So as defined in literature and carried out in practice, it relates to groups. So lobbying relates to groups, what they may want, and what government controls what they want. So in other words, it is about to persuade the government to do what? To agree with them. It is about to persuade the government, agree with us. Like I remember when the finance bill, before it was made into a law, there were groups of people that were gotten from various areas, various section of this particular government. You'd find that there is a group of teachers, group of employees, and so on and so forth, and they were to look at the finance bill and say something about it, including the housing tax. They were to look at the housing tax. So you see, initially housing tax was proposed to be 3% of the gross, but now the lobbyists that were there, they said, no, that is too much. And they negotiated with the government to a point that the housing tax was dropped from 3% to 1.5% of the gross. Now, these are the people we call the lobbyists. Therefore, lobbying is done by all staff of organized entities in all sectors of public life and by group of all sizes and reputation. So in an organization, you can have your own lobbyist. Maybe the government have said that thing that you're doing, that building that you're building there, it will not take place because it goes against some rules and regulations. So what do? Do you just stop because the government has said that? You send your own lobbyist to lobby with the government, at least to change that rule so that it can allow you proceed with your activity. Now that is the work of a lobbyist. So a lobbyist talks on behalf of the organization. He does he does what we call negotiate. He's actually a negotiator. A lobbyist is a negotiator. He negotiates terms. For example, there are terms that the government might release concerning your organization, or they may come up against your organization, that these terms are against your organization. Now, these terms, you find that now these terms are not, and then you send lobbyists, you send some people to go and negotiate with the government. And you don't just send any Tom, Dick, and Harry, you send people who know what they are doing, people who know how the government operates, people know the offices that they are going to visit, the person that they are going to talk to. Now, mostly you'll find that lobbyists, they are people who have contact with government officials. They are people who have worked in government for some times. They are people who know other people in the government, and they know very well whether those rules can be changed or not. So they advise the organization. Like, for example, if you are going to buy a property as an organization, and you know very well that the government has issued a notice that nobody should buy that property. As an organization, we can send lobbyists to go and lobby with the government, to sit down with the government official so that they can do what? They can withhold that notice and they can make it favorable for them to buy that particular property of land. So the word is used to include what is known in literature as pressure groups. So sometimes when you talk about lobbyists, you may be thinking about this particular group called pressure groups. You can be thinking about interest groups. You know, pressure groups, they exert pressure on the government. We can also be talking about people like activists. We can be talking about people who put pressure in the government. Those are lobbyists. So to lobby is not bad, but to lobby, when you are lobbying, it simply means that you're not happy with that decision. And it's like what we call negotiating. You have been sent to negotiate with the government regarding the rules that they have put, and these rules and regulations, they are not favoring you. So go and negotiate with the government to change their mind or to calm down or to change those rules that they have brought. So group seeks to achieve the purposes for which their members came together, e.g. making profit, following recreation, etc. So groups lobby to ensure that government is at least neutral. So why do we lobby? We lobby so that at least the government is neutral about their purposes and at best supportive. At least the government is neutral. You know, sometimes there are rules and regulations, that very harsh rules and the regulations that government can release. And when you look at those rules, they are actually putting some of us away completely. So at least to make sure that the government is neutral, we negotiate. And how do we negotiate? We send lobbyists to go and negotiate terms. Something like that. Now, let's look at the practices of a PR specialism. When you talk about lobbying, maybe you are asking, is lobbying a PR practice or not? It's a PR practice. For example, you go to an organization, you'll find that they have public relations practitioner who are lobbyists. I have told you that not every PR practitioner is a lobbyist, because a lobbyist is a person who understands how government works. And most likely, you'll find that lobbyists, they have at one time worked with government. Maybe they were MPs. Maybe they were senators. Maybe they were women reps. Maybe he was a chief. He was a county commissioner. He's an ex-county commissioner. He is an ex-internal security minister. So these are people who knows very well how government operates. Maybe they were MCAs, a member of county assembly. So he knows how the government operates. So when you tell this person, go and lobby about this, they know where to touch, the people to call, because they have the contacts of people in government. So not everybody in a public relations organization is a lobbyist. And lobbyists, they understand very well. They know the rules, the regulations, and they even advises the organization. They will tell the organization, according to the law of Kenya, if you do this, I think this one will land you somewhere and you will not like it. They advise the organization, according to the laws, this is what you're supposed to do. And when you do it like this, nothing will happen. That's how lobbyists work. They understand very well, they understand the laws. They understand how government works. So when they are advising the government, they know exactly what they are doing. And of course, you will find an organization that has got public relations practitioner that do not have lobbyists. It's a PR practitioner who doesn't know anything about how the government works. But if you don't have these lobbyists, you can do what we call, you can outsource. You can outsource them. But at least, again, you can have them. Maybe you have employed somebody who was an MCA, so he knows how the government works. So it is inside PR practice. Why? Because it's a communication-based activity. That's why we are saying that when you talk about lobbying, it's a PR practice, because it is a communication-based activity. It involves communication, communicating with the government, communicating with government officials, visiting, maybe, for example, the Minister for Internal Security, visiting, for example, the Minister for Lands. Maybe you want to secure a land, and that land has got some issues, or the government has given you a warning. Maybe it is an industry. It has, when you talk about the National Construction Authority has given you a warning, and it has said demolish that particular property. Will you just demolish the property? No, negotiate with the government. Who will do it for you is a person who was there, who was in the government, or who is still in the government, who will negotiate for you. Of course, when you're in the government, you cannot negotiate. You cannot go against the terms that the government has put. The only person who can negotiate for you is an ex-worker of the government, who is a PR practitioner. You are negotiating on behalf of the organization. So it's a communication-centered activity on group organization, on a group or organization which seeks to persuade and negotiate with those stakeholders in the government on matters of opportunity or threats. That's how it is. That is a lobbyist. And lobbying, it is done by individual in one or two employment categories. So we have in-house lobbyists. In-house lobbyists, they are people that have been employed by the organization. You are an ex-MCA. You are maybe, for example, an ex-DO, or you are a chief. Now you have joined our organization. We have given you a public relations officer post. Now, you, because you're in our organization, then you are what? You are an in-house lobbyist. So this one, they are directly employed by the organization, and they are hired by the organization as lobbyists. While that is it. While sometimes if you don't have lobbyists, we can do what? We can outsource them. We can hire them. We can outsource them. To outsource simply means you go and you hire them. Once they do your work, you release them. You give them a contract. You outsource them. That is external lobbyists. So in-house lobbyists are often known as public affairs. So if you visit so many organizations, you'll find that we have public affairs officer. So that one is a lobbyist. Or they are sometimes called corporate communications manager. These are the titles. If you want to know that this one is an in-house lobbyist, look at the titles. They are called public affairs manager, public affairs officer, public affairs practitioner, or corporate communications manager, or corporate communications officer, or corporate communication executive, or corporate communication associate, or something like that. And are in staff as opposed to client relationship with representative boards. Those are the titles. They go with such titles. And what do lobbyists do then? Now that you have hired lobbyists in your organization, what do they do? Number one, provide access to public policy makers. When you hire a lobbyist, it becomes a link, provides access. For example, you'd want to talk to the deputy president. What lobbyists do, they provide access for the organization to the deputy president. Maybe you want to talk to the Minister of Trade. Who will make sure that you talk to the Minister for Trade? It is a lobbyist, because they have contact, they have official contact of the officials of government, and therefore they provide access to policymakers, those people who are making decisions in government. They will provide access to such people. So lobbying can be viewed as a specialism from form of networking in the field of public policy making access. It can be characterized as points of linkage between separate groups of actors in the field. So the provision of access results in the ability of the group for whom the lobbyists work to make its case to a decision. So for you to access what we call lobbyists, it comes in two forms, either personal or individual. Personal or individual access, the principal and her lobbyists meet the decision makers. So personal access or individual access is when the principal and his lobbyist meet the decision makers. You meet them. Then there is also another access. It is called personal and electronic. Personal and electronic is that at least the minister or the person that you want to meet or the decision maker in the government has told you to, has called you, or you have called him and you are negotiating over the phone. That is called personal and electronic form. Or maybe you can even create a Zoom meeting with them and you negotiate what you want to negotiate. So number one, we have said lobbyists, they do what? They provide access to public makers, public policy makers. Number two, they make representation. They make representation. So lobbyists, they represent the organization. So when they go to negotiate about something concerning the organization, then they represent you. For example, it's a piece of land that you want to buy. And there are strict rules that have been put in place by the Minister for Land. That property, you cannot buy it. So you look for lobbyists, send them to the Minister for Land. So when lobbyists go there, they will say, we are representing our client who is XYZ Bank or ABC Bank. So once access has been gained, presentation has to be made. This has to be made. This is in line with preferences of most ad lobbyists who do not want to be in the firing line sharp questioning. Now, lobbyists are not experts. You are told that lobbyists, they know exactly what they are going to say. They know exactly how to represent your company. There are some things that they may not understand. Like you'll find a lobbyist is so much specialized in, he was a lawyer before. He worked with the High Court. He was an advocate of the High Court before. So he will be able to advise you if you're going to meet a policymaker in government. So one aspect of representation or putting the case to a decision maker is worth separate mention. So you're being told, whenever the policy expertise come from the argument that is not in favor of the group, and it must have several qualities. So when you talk about what we call a lobbyist must have several qualities. You don't just hire a lobbyist in your organization. It has to be intellectually coherent. It has to demonstrate a public interest dimension, and he has to go with the prevailing drift of government policy. And lobbyists have to show that there is the added value of strengthened public interest in any argument. So suppose you are going to argue about something. Maybe the government has told you, maybe you had started building your organization. The government issues strict rules and tells you to demolish your organization, that building that you are electing. So when you are lobbying, when you are lobbying, have the government official here, say, for example, this one is the Minister for Land. And you're telling them, give us a go ahead so that we can actually continue with the building. Then, as you negotiate, you must show Minister for Land that Once I complete that particular factory or that organization, the community will benefit a lot. How will the community benefit? How will the government benefit? What benefit is it? So that at least if there are rules that have been put, strict rules regarding building that you are electing, at least the government can be neutral. When you are lobbying for something, you must show the government the benefit of what you are lobbying for. Why the government should do what? Should agree with you or should actually give you a go-ahead for what they have either blocked you from doing. Then there is also what we call lobbyists. There are also what we call policy advisors. They advise the organization. For example, you want to buy a property. And this person knows very well he has worked with the Ministry for Land. He will advise you, for you to buy this property, these are the steps that you should take. For you actually, some people in Kenya or in some organizations in Kenya, you find that you buy a piece of land, and after buying the piece of land, you are told that that property has been sold to several other people. And so you find that you have been conned. If you have a lobbyist who, of course, a lobbyist who has been in the government before, will be able to tell you, to advise you that this is how you go about when you are buying a piece of land. This is how you go about when you're buying a vehicle or property. So many lobbyists are experts in their field, and they have usually worked for a business trade association. Some of them had worked with trade union of pressure groups for a very long time, and therefore being a lobbyist give the post holder an overview of the organization he or she represents, and policy knowledge is relatively easy to come by. So this privileged position is usually reinforced by the organization chart. So lobbyists are attached to chairmen. You find that they have an attachment to chairmen. They are attached to what we call the MDs, managing directors. So generally, policy expertise is more likely to be found with in-house lobbyists than hired ones. You see, in-house lobbyists are people that are within the organization. When you hire some lobbyists outside there, you'll have to take time to educate them about the organization, to tell them this organization has got so many branches, this branch. You are giving them now the history of the organization, what you do, and the reason why you have called them. So you will spend a lot of time trying to make yourself familiar with the outside lobbyists as opposed to the in-house lobbyists. In-house lobbyists are people that you have worked with. They know the organization. They know the departments of the organization and the functions of every department. Unlike the outside lobbyists, itabidi uanze kuwafunza. You'll have now to start educating them and telling them this organization A, B, C, D, X, Y, Z. Another function of a lobbyist is used as an administrative support group leader. So lobbyist is popularly perceived as an activity which involves mixing with high status individuals. Very true. And the great majority of lobbying work is mundane and does not little to quicken the pulse. So in other words, lobbying can be conceptualized as either the backgrounder or the foregrounder type. The backgrounder work is an unseen advisor, monitoring documents in the passive senses, giving policy control completely to his principal, drafting documents for others, suggesting relevant course of decision makers, and present and present but silent at meetings. Now, the backgrounder is a person who does things behind the scene. He's the one drafting document for you. If it's a court case, he does something for you. He's not there to be seen. He does things behind the scene. He advises you and tells you when you do this one will go well with you. But we also have foregrounder. Foregrounder, they are seen, they are known. So these people called lobbyists, they give advice on processes of policy making, and he is comfortable with minimal autonomy. So the foregrounder works as the visible advisor. You can see him. You can see him in meetings. You can see him everywhere you go. You can see him representing the organization. The foregrounder is seen and he is known, unlike the backgrounder. Backgrounder, he does things behind the scene. You will never see him, but he advises you. He writes you what we call email. He writes for you. He advises you on the email, and so on and so forth, signs documents for you, and so on and so forth. So the foregrounder is an active spokesperson for their groups. They are policy experts, monitoring the group's environment, ready to be policy formulators, prepared to represent the client alone in front of decision makers, and they are comfortable with media campaigns. These people are comfortable with media campaigns. So then we have what we call lobbying styles. Lobbying styles, and we are saying that lobbying relies on personal contact with senior public post holders at private meetings. And then we are saying having occurred high levels of decisions about what was said at such meetings and confidently on information exchanges and any agreement or conflict. And this helps to explain why there is tension between some lobbyists and PR practitioners. Yeah, there are some, when you talk about tension, PR practitioners and lobbyists, they don't agree. There is always some fight between two of them, because PR practitioner thinks that the lobbyists have come to take their jobs. Because when you compare the PR practitioners and the lobbyists, you'll find that lobbyists, they know so much about how the government operates. They have a lot of information as compared to PR practitioners. So you find that there is always tension between lobbyists and PR practitioners, because PR practitioners think that the lobbyists have come to take their job, but all of them are just the same. They need to work together. What are some of the background titles and reputations of lobbyists? A significant number of lobbyists were previously involved in government as either research assistants. That's what we started by saying. A significant number of lobbyists were involved in government matters as either what we call research assistants. Some of them were MPs. Some of them were financial party workers. Some of them were civil servants. Some of them were MPs or MCAs. Some of them are ex-militaries. The implication is that lobbyists are likely to be very familiar with policy processes and personnel, and that their principals employ them because of this knowledge and their contact. That's why they are employed, because huyu anajua vile government inafanya kazi, then we employ him. So in matters of maybe buying property, this one will be advising us how we can be buying our properties. In matters of dealing with such an issue, this one will be advising us. So the government organizations employ them because at least they know how the government operates. The implication is that you could not lobby without knowing the policy making system. Very true. For example, you cannot be a lobbyist. You cannot be told, can you go and lobby with the Minister for Land concerning maybe the restriction that he has put on the company. You cannot lobby if you don't know things to do with land. Or maybe, for example, the organization sends you to Minister for Labor to go and lobby about maybe the restrictions that were put when employing a new employee. You cannot lobby if you don't know anything about what we call about the policy. You need to know the policy very well. You need to know the policy regarding property buying in Kenya. So in-house lobbyists work under titles such as, we have said this, public affairs. You will find in-house lobbyists having titles like government relations officer. Or you will find them calling themselves corporate relations, or calling themselves parliamentary liaison officer, while hired lobbyists work for firms calling themselves public affair consultant. See, when you outsource lobbyists, you will find that you are outsourcing them from, they have titles like public affairs consultant, corporate communication specialists, PR consultants, or political and regulatory advisors. Those are the titles of outsourced lobbyists. Then we are saying that lobbying can be viewed as highline load, which attracts to itself fears about a powerful particular interest being privilege over public interest. The resolution of this tension lies, among other things, in openness about government dealings with groups, these lobbyists, and their accountability to the electorate of elected, usually and appointed public servants, their dealings and agreements with groups and their lobbyists. I want you to read on, does lobbying achieve its goals? When you hire lobbyists, they achieve their goals. That's what I want you to read. When you hire lobbyists to do something for you as an organization, they achieve their goals. That's the question. That's what you will read there. Then you will class. Unless there is a question, I'll stop at that point. Any question? Joan Iminza, good morning. Joan, want to speak?
Morning.
Thank you. So any question?